Spoiler alert. I mean, honestly, if you're listening to this podcast, spoilers.
Spoilers.
Fannel, be careful. Careful. We don't want an accident.
I was admiring the workmanship.
Do you think people will be impressed?
They're the finest plastic flowers I've ever seen.
Yes, well, that's our object. To show the world the skill of the modern plastics industry.
People of the universe, please attend carefully. The message which follows is of vital importance to you all. We present to you a case study of one of the most dangerous minds in the universe. A history of the lives and times of the renegade Time Lord known as the Master.
The Master.
Call me Master.
The choice is simple. Join us and continue listening, or face total annihilation.
Listen.
They are the Master, and you will obey them.
You will obey me.
Please attend carefully. Hello and welcome to Please Attend Carefully, the Doctor Who podcast about the most magisterial of malefactors. I'm Ciarán Moffatt.
And I'm Amber Patrick.
And each week we bring you a chapter from the lives and times of the renegade Time Lord known universally as the Master. This week we will be looking at Terror of the Autons, a 1971 TV story written by Robert Holmes. What's it about?
Well, it's the first appearance of the Master in the TV series, and it sees him joining forces with the Autons to try and bring the Nestene consciousness to Earth.
Wonderful. Amber, get us started with Terror of the Autons. Apparently, originally was called The Spray of Death. That was the original working title. A sequel to Robert Holmes's 1970 story, Spearhead from Space.
Yeah, so 1970, September 18th, is when they film this episode.
Yep.
It's the introduction, obviously, to the very first thing, top of the episode, our intro to Delgado.
Yeah, the first time we see the Suave Master, as we are calling him. And what I love about it is you hear a sound that sounds like the TARDIS, but not quite like the TARDIS.
Different.
Not quite. And yes, he emerges from a horse box, which is basically a lot, like a
mobile horse.
Motorized horse float. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that is the first thing his TARDIS is.
Yep.
A horse box.
It genuinely does look like the BBC just got one of their on-location actors' trailers and just put it there.
He's wearing his signature outfit, I think, as
Yeah,
he
he's wearing
emerges.
the Nehru collar,
Yep.
White shirt, and black gloves, which is gloves are a really big thing for him. I notice in a lot of his stories.
Well, he's a fancy man.
He's a fancy man. But his very first line is, "I am usually referred to as the Master."
Oh, is that so? Universal.
Just so everyone's well aware,
Just
this is who
very
this is.
first line.
With the absolutely grubby carny owner, Luigi.
That's right. Yeah, he's Luigi Rossini. So your name's Lou Russell.
Yeah, just undermines the first person he sees.
Yeah,
shows
immediately.
off who he is.
This podcast is all about the Master. So the Master in this story comes from the head writer, Barry Letts. He was the showrunner. He inherited it the season before, but this was his first whole season where he got to plan everything out.
Yes. I think they were finding that because now, the third Doctor is stuck on Earth and not going to as many fantastical locations.
Yeah.
They need to bring in some element that is intriguing about Earth. Some kind of threat that is going to take people away from it being... Because they were getting complaints, apparently, that children were finding the series a bit of a letdown that the Doctor wasn't traveling in time and space. So their answer to this is the Master.
Well, that comes from at several places. They needed more impetus in the stories. Also, the previous, the format for the show in episodes had been like 4-7-7-7, which they were like, you can't, like 7-episode stories are just drag on too much. They can do.
Huge.
So they needed to change that. So they changed up the stories for this season. So they're all 4-episode stories. As he said, he wanted new jumping on points for people.
Yep.
And so it really works well for the Master's machinations. Like they're not too overdrawn. Another thing, of course, was they knew that they needed someone on the same level as the Doctor. And in the previous season, they had Liz Shaw. But you can't have the companion on the same level as the Doctor because the companion is the audience's
jumping
entry
in.
into the show.
You see, Doctor, you're my intellectual equal. Almost.
So they needed a villain. And, you know, a lot can be said about their relationship. But, you know, basically best frenemies.
Yeah. And even in real life, like, rumors is it's Pertwee who picked Delgado to be this role.
Yes, apparently, I believe it says in one of the production diaries that he'd worked with Delgado before. They'd done a sword fighting scene in a show before, and they were like, "This is perfect."
Yep.
And Barry Letts talks about him and Terrence Dicks, who was the scriptwriter. Terrence Dicks has written more Doctor Who than any other person on the face of the earth. And they talked about how the Doctor is analogous with Sherlock Holmes and his companion is Dr. Watson. And so where is Moriarty is what they were saying. Where is Moriarty? They wanted someone someone that is the equal but opposite.
Yeah.
And also, interestingly, if you watch this season, season 8, which every episode, like every story, the Master is the main villain. He is the main villain in the same way that Moriarty is the villain in Sherlock Holmes, in that he helps other. Like he's a consulting criminal.
Yes.
The Napoleon of crime. He helps other people, and in this, he is with the Autons.
I do believe in the novelization of this, consulting criminal is actually somewhere officially written as to what he is. I think in the novelization, a consultant of evil or something is the title given to him. Yeah,
there's a lot to draw from that. And you can see that come across in this story. I think there's a lot of really interesting things about the Master that this story adds on the whole. So it's the first story we meet the Master. We have a Time Lord come down.
Yes, and unnamed, just Time Lord.
Just Time Lord. Turns up in a snappy little bowler hat and brolly, as if he'd just finished his Times crossword and stepped off the train on his way to the office.
May I say that I think you look quite ridiculous in those clothes?
I am travelling incognito.
Oh, why?
We Time Lords don't care to be conspicuous.
And he comes in and says, "Oi, you know, you should probably know that the master's in town."
Yeah, I don't know how much I should talk about the novelization. So,
I think it's very worth. We should note that this episode is about Terror of the Autons as a whole. So we will be looking at both the novelization and the TV, how they differ and how they work together, because they're written. The novelization's written by Terrence Dicks, who script wrote this episode and he co-created The Master with Barry Letts.
Yes.
So if anyone knows, it's him.
Yeah. So for this podcast, I'm the one who read the novelization.
I couldn't be bothered.
I read it in one day when I was sick. Got through the whole thing. This scene is probably the most interesting change of the whole novelization, because this Time Lord doesn't come to Earth to warn the Doctor that the Master is here. He comes to Earth to task the Doctor with bringing the Master to justice on behalf of the Time Lords. And if he does this for them, they will reduce his exile.
So time off for good behavior.
Yes. And that's what they basically say. So it's really interesting that in the show, he's just like, "Oh, Master's in town, better watch yourself." But in the book, he's like, "If you arrest this man for us, we'll take that into consideration when we review your case."
It's interesting, and we've talked about this while watching the story, is that, of course, the novelization came out in 1975. It was 4 years after this aired, and so it's well after it's moved, well along. 1975 would have been around the time that Tom Baker was taking over. So it's come out well. So Terrence Dicks had the opportunity to sort of pepper in some things, because of course we know, I mean, spoiler alert if you've not watched season 8 yet, it ends with the Doctor being given the knowledge of time travel again
Yes.
and getting his dematerialization circuit again so he can travel the Earth, which from a production standpoint is basically going, look, we know people want us to go to alien planets again. We've been on Earth for 3 years now.
Now wait!
Oh. Good luck.
So to kick off the sort of the Master in this story,
Yes.
do you think he is on Earth specifically because the Doctor is there and he's going to prove he's the best by taking over the planet that the Doctor is currently on? Or is it a coincidence?
See, I don't
Like what's got him to there? What's made him go, you know what,
I
I'm
don't
gonna do?
think. See, this is a very interesting point. I don't think. I think for him the mission is the thing. I don't think he's doing. I think he's doing it to do it. Like he's working for the Autons basically. Like he is doing the job for the Autons. I think quite a lot of what the Master does is basically him going, "Oh, that's an interesting exercise. I wonder if I could do that." Like it's sort of, oh, that might be diverting. Yes, I can see how that could be done. It basically people playing on his ego. And yeah, he, as I said, like this whole series, each story is basically about him helping another alien race
yeah.
or something to try and take Earth. I mean, why is everyone obsessed with Earth? From a production standpoint, it's cheaper to film here.
Yeah.
It is much more expensive for the BBC to send its pyrotechnics department to Alpha Centauri. But yeah, it comes across as he is aware that the Doctor's there, but I think he's kind of...
It's probably more that the Nestine consciousness have maybe contacted him somewhere else, or he somehow found out that they have that dormant pod down there.
Yeah,
Because
possibly.
he would have to be in contact with them in order to know that he's transmitting the frequency.
Yeah. They've
bring
obviously,
them.
as is often the case with Master stories, we're coming in the middle for the Master. We always come in at the beginning for the Doctor, because of course the story follows the Doctor, whether or not that's unfair or not. We're coming in the middle, so the Master's done a lot of prep work before all of this. I don't know, it kind of feels like, and this is probably the single worst analogy I could possibly use, but it feels like say you go shopping somewhere, or like you're somewhere where you know that your ex works, and you like you know that there is a possibility that you might run into them, but unless you're a creepy stalker, you're not there specifically to run into them.
Yep.
Like that's how
And
I
a
feel
friend
about
shows
it.
up and's like, "Hey, so you know your ex is here? I just saw them."
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
yes,
Which,
I think
which
my
reads a lot
take-
into that. Yeah.
My take on that Time Lord that shows up is that he's a real gossip. Because why else is he there?
Well, I mean, this is the thing. We occasionally see Time Lords
Yes.
in the show. And for example, this time he turns up, as I say, in a bowler hat and a brolly and a nice suit. And the next time they turn up, they're just in their normal like black and white robes in the Three Doctors. And then in like Genesis of the Daleks, the next time one of them just pops up to just sort of randomly talk to the Doctor, he's wearing this weird black snood thing.
I love that.
and it's just standing there in a quarry being cryptic.
Yep.
And you just sort of go, what? It is an odd choice. And also we should point out, like, if you haven't seen it, this Time Lord pops into existence.
Oh dear. Don't go away, Doctor!
Midair.
Like
Up a radio tower.
Yeah, up a radio tower. I mean, we will get into how much Master loves a radio tower. But yeah, just pops into it and then just sort of with it like an audible pop. So yeah, I don't think the Master went there specifically for the Doctor.
Okay.
I think that there are people out there who will write fan fiction that he did. I don't think he did.
Fair enough. So I do love in this, like, with the radio tower. So when we see the Master get into the radio tower at the start, he just walks through the front door.
Yeah.
And in the novel, he is just so much more dramatic than that. It establishes that he has been on top of the office of the radio tower since dawn, spread-eagled, waiting to just get in there.
Just laying on the
Just
roof.
laying on the roof.
Why didn't he go?
And then he,
why
like,
didn't he
drops
go in
in-
at dusk or something?
Yeah, like drops in through a skylight onto them. But in the, I mean, obviously, I guess physically Delgado wasn't up to that, or there wasn't the money for that. So in the show, he just walks through the door. But I love the idea of him waiting up there for the operators to turn up for their morning shift.
See, this is the thing about Roger Delgado, and it is exemplified in this story. He is he's a very restrained actor.
Yeah, I don't know
He's
how I
very
would-
calm and he's very still. He does a lot with his face and his eyes, and all of his movements are very, very subtle, but beautifully executed.
Yeah, I don't think I could imagine him spread-eagled on the roof of a radio tower. It's not really in.
Again, you're not in the fanfic business.
Report from one of our field sections, sir, Captain Yates. Some kind of sabotage at a radio telescope. 2 of their scientists have disappeared.
Let me see that.
So yeah, so his grand plan. Let's talk about his scheme for this episode.
So there's obviously always the plot. Like, we know who the master is. The master is the enemy of the Doctor. Like, he is the equal but opposite. The yang to the Doctor's yin.
Yeah. And like he possesses almost the same tools in that he's got his own TARDIS.
Yes.
And he's often got a hypnotized companion, in quotes, and that he has people who do his bidding for him.
You will obey me and no one else. Do you understand?
I shall obey.
Yeah, this is sounding more and more like an abusive relationship. Anyway, but yes, no. So his TARDIS, the chameleon circuit, works for a start, so it can appear as
whatever he wants.
And throughout the series, it appears as many, many things, whereas the Doctor's still, just the police box there. It is a very ballsy thing to have a TARDIS and come land on Earth for someone who is desperate to find a TARDIS so that he can leave. The Doctor, of course, in this story, steals a piece of the Master's TARDIS to try and make his own work, the dematerialization circuit. But of course, it won't work with the Doctor's TARDIS, and now the Master's TARDIS won't work without it.
Yeah, so now he's stuck on Earth as well at the end of this episode.
Okay, so
but the plot. His scheme for this episode is to make Autons in a plastic factory.
Which they were doing in the last Auton story as well.
And then bring the Nestine consciousness.
To bring the whole consciousness there. Which is funny, because, they've already got an awful lot of Autons already.
Yeah.
Because, an awful lot of pieces of Nestine consciousness. There's got to be a link with the Nestine consciousness already to animate the humanoid Autons. And also the other bits of plastic that the Master has decided to go. And I think, honestly, from a production side of things, they did a really good job making the mundane scary. This is Stephen Moffat writ large and early.
Yeah, so the scary aspects of this story are plastic inflatable chair, like the ones we had in the 90s. Well, I didn't have in the 90s. Like my sister had in the 90s.
My older sisters had them. Yeah, the sort of thing that you would get if you got one of the big show bags at the Adelaide show, which is a very regional thing, I know. So if any of you are listening overseas, you're like, what? But yeah, those inflatable vinyl chairs.
Yeah, so one of those eats a man.
Yes, it does. Unrealistic because they didn't spend 20 minutes beforehand going...
It's self-inflating. That's what's so incredible about this.
And
Masters.
deflating.
Yeah.
It deflates on him.
Then after that, weird, chunky, awful-looking doll.
See, it reminded me of, I don't know if you remember in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a thing called My Pet Monster.
Oh, I do know that.
Yeah, blue and furry with rubber bits and chains on its hands.
Yeah.
It reminded me a bit of that, only not as cute.
Yeah. And in the show, they point out, no kid's going to want this. And the characters, both in the novel and the show, say that it's for the adult market.
Even though kids love
But I also
ugly
have
things.
no idea what adult wants that thing.
Look, if you brought it out now, the Who nerds would go mad.
They probably
I would buy one.
Our social pages, I can put up the illustration from the novel because it's significantly different to the one that was in the show. And I do wonder if Terrence was just like, you know what? That looked awful. Now we're in the written form with an
We can describe it better.
We can describe it better. We can draw something that's a bit more threatening looking. And it does look quite menacing and creepy in the illustration.
Look, kids do like creepy things.
Yeah.
I think kids like creepy things. They like disgusting. They like being grossed out. They also, I would argue, and I'm a big fan of folklore and fairy tales and things like that. I would argue that kids love being scared. I think it's actually an evolutionary thing. Kids like being scared because then they can run to their parents and it reinforces that familial bond.
Wasn't that with Doctor Who originally with the Sidemen and the Daleks? In the first seasons, kids were scared by them, but they loved them.
Yeah, exactly. The old watching from behind the sofa, which I agree. I can't remember who it was. Someone wrote, "No one has ever actually had a sofa that wasn't up against a wall." And I was like, you mentioned it. Yeah. Who the hell's fitting behind the sofa?
Yeah.
Anyway.
So this episode actually got, at the time, very heavily criticized for making the mundane scary.
Yes.
Kids were afraid to take the teddy bears to bed with them.
Yes.
There are police officers that are portrayed as scary monsters, as Autons, which Scotland Yard complained about.
Yeah, we should talk about that. So in the one scene, it's the cliffhanger of episode 3. They get picked up by police, and the policeman turns around, and John Pertwee grabs the face and rips it off, and it's just smooth plastic underneath.
Excuse me, officer, could I see your warrant card?
Cliffhanger. Barry Letts, the showrunner, said that he got a polite note from the police saying, "Please don't portray police this way." But history also relates that they might have actually sent a much stronger worded thing telling them to cease and desist, and that police cannot be seen to be villains, which it's 2023.
Delgado, he apparently got fan mail that was to the contrary, where people were saying he wasn't scary enough. And he replied to them saying, "Wait 2 more weeks." So I'm, the story that comes next. And
yeah. Oh, it's a great way to get people hooked. It's just you're not scary enough. Keep watching.
Yeah. So he goes for that weird doll thing. And then the final phase of the plan is plastic daffodils.
So yeah, it sounds stupid now, but I've looked it up. There were several companies in the 70s who were giving things away with, and people have always done this. Like when they're trying to market a product, they give things away. I thought it was butter, but apparently I think I've double checked on it. It was a soap powder,
which they say in the episode.
They did say soap, yeah.
Yeah.
We're handing out plastic flowers. So yeah, they've made something mundane scary. And also, you have to remember, Robert Holmes, this is a very early, it's a very early sort of criticism of plastic in the way it is. And I mean, now here we are again, as I say, here we are in 2023, and we know the dangers of plastics and microplastics.
Chibnall did an episode that was about the dangers.
Yeah, so I don't think he actually wrote it. It was written by another. It was written by another writer, and I'm pretty sure I read a thing saying it was called Praxeus. I think they wanted it to be an Auton story, but in the end, I don't think they got the right story. The Chibnall didn't want it to be an Auton story, but I remember watching it and thinking, why wasn't that an Auton story?
Yeah.
It makes it like microplastics. That is a perfect Auton plot, basically.
Yeah, inside people already, these tiny microplastics that are.
Yeah.
We're getting very.
We are. But I think it's okay. So I think it's a good point to make. So
here comes the Master into his first story to weaponize mundane,
and he says specifically it was his idea, the daffodils.
Yeah,
he says in the story it was his idea.
Yes, that's right. It's his addition to the nesting invasion plan.
Yeah, because they've got the Autons, which they've had for a while. Which apparently are just still, they're making more, but I think that some of them are just still there, basically, from the last time. So
yeah, he's got his plan. There's only one thing that'll stop him, as always. It's pretty well thought out. It's a bit clunky at first. They got to fill 4 episodes. As you said while we were watching, it takes them 2 full episodes until we even get to the daffodils, which is like the actual plan. Like the chair and the doll are just interim threats.
It very much felt like these are all the things that could be threatening. There is one more thing I want to say on the daffodils, and that is in Justin Richards' The Secret Lives of Monsters book, which is told in a sort of in-university way of a history of weird things that have happened. And it talks about that case from a perspective someone doesn't know. And it says that UNIT covered them up by saying that all the people who died were killed by a serial killer called the Flower Power Killer.
Wow. And as we know from just watching the episode, 46 people
46 people, something like that, died.
It's like the most prolific serial killer in history if they hit 46 people in
all in the home
days.
counties. It is insane.
The book establishes that this time passes quite significantly. So this
when
story,
in the show it feels like the first episode goes. We noticed that the third Doctor changes clothes 3 times in the space of the first episode.
Yeah, whereas in the book this is over the space of about nearly a month. This entire story. So the daffodils are happening for a week. So the Doctor's in the lab investigating this daffodil for near on a week.
I see you've been working on the Nestine Autojet. My own small contribution to their invasion plan.
Vicious, complicated, and inefficient. Typical of your way of
Now,
thinking.
come, Doctor.
So hypnosis, that's the other big aspect of
Yes.
the Master's character that makes him different from the Doctor, in that he knows how to wield power over lesser beings and he's not afraid to do that. In fact, he takes great pleasure in doing it.
Well, that's the sort of thing, isn't it? The Master is basically what the Doctor could be if the Doctor didn't have scruples.
I think we mentioned it while we were watching the episode. Just a revolving door of men that he just hypnotizes in this. One after another, just enter into this set and
that their entire purpose is to come into it and die. Like Farrell's father, who comes into it and his entire life in this show is to come in and be killed by a small troll doll.
yeah. And then there's the 2 radio operators at the start, one of whom won't stop talking about eggs. He's the first death by tissue compression.
Yes, the tissue compression eliminator. Right, we should. We'll get into that once we finish the hypnotism. So the hypnotism is something that the Master does. It is a well-established thing that the Master is very fond of doing.
I love that in the show itself, they don't actually do any kind of effect. There's just a stinger of music, which we can put in here.
Yep.
And that tells you they've been hypnotized. In the future, we kind of get the "you will obey me." I can definitely hear Jacoby saying that a lot.
Well, yeah, that becomes a so it's not as apparent in this episode. I think it's something that starts getting written in at the end, towards the end of this series, and possibly the series after. But that becomes that's the Master's catchphrase, basically. Is I am the Master, and you will obey me.
Yeah, I mean, this Master is so suave and so cool. He doesn't even need to say that. He just
looks at people and goes.
I mean, I'd do what he said if he looked at me.
That's the design, isn't it? So
Yeah.
he the face and the facial hair. And
it's all very pointed and sharp.
It's based on the famous, at least hugely famous at the time, mesmerist Svengali.
Yep. Of course.
And that was all about the eyes. That was all about the way he looked at you. And yeah, the Suave Master, played by Roger Delgado, just those eyes.
Your instructions are already implanted. You will obey them without a further word from me.
It's a beautiful performance, and as I say, it's a beautifully restrained performance as compared to some other actors in the role who, I mean, as much as I love them, can be hugely over the top and hammy. I mean, we'll get to Anthony Ainley. We will get to Anthony Ainley, but he was a ham, but he was brilliant at it.
And I think it's why, as well, Delgado demands so much respect in the role throughout the rest of the, you get a sense of all the other regenerations in, particularly in Masterful, they're almost pleased he's not there because to some extent they're all quite scared of him.
And I think it's worth noting that although his Master appears in several comics and short stories and things like that, he himself only played the Master in 8 televised stories.
Yep, but the impression that he leaves, it's kind of almost what you measure other Masters.
Absolutely. And for such a long time, he was the only Master. He was the only person to be the Master. I mean, if you look at the spreadsheet, if you look at the Master spreadsheet, it's just even today people call back to him. If you look at comics and things like that, they all call back to him more than anyone else. And I think do you think that's a certain amount of just people being, a bit Smith's chips about everything, just like the original and the best?
No, I think a lot of it comes from, there are a few aspects, I think, and I'm going to save one which will lead into the next part of our discussion, I think. The first one is he is just so cool and the suaveness. He is just capturing on the screen. He is mesmerizing to look at. Like there is just this total control and respect that he demands.
Yeah.
I do also think, unfortunately, like his untimely passing means that he never got a conclusion to his master. It doesn't end for him. There was no goodbye. There was no send off. It was just this incredible, fantastic character that we just didn't see anymore. So, you know, he never overstayed his welcome or anything. Like it was just perfect, start to finish, his run as the master.
Yep, absolutely. I agree. And I think, because we'll get into that when we get to his final story, which is Frontier in Space, because of course he very tragically passed away in a car accident in Spain in 1973, when he was due to play the Master again in the final story with the Third Doctor, which was later replaced by the Planet of the Spiders.
And I mean, John Pertwee has even said that one of the reasons he ultimately did decide to go was because he missed Delgado so much.
Yes, I can see that.
He also decided it was time to leave.
Yeah.
Without him there, it's just sad. But you know, I do think that adds to almost the mystique of that master.
Yeah, you're not wrong. He is the most mysterious of the Masters. I feel like we know more about all the other Masters, and even where another actor has taken on the role. So, for example, there are some audios where John Culshaw has been playing the Master, both the Tree Mass Master, Anthony Ainley's role, and the Suave Master. But he seems to have done a lot less of the Suave Master than he has of the Tree Mass Master. It's very interesting. I'm not sure whether it's like you feel like Big Finish would have gone to that, but it does really sort of feel like people are holding back out of respect for Roger Delgado, because it's so hard to follow.
I know. I just feel like there's that fear I would feel as a writer of, could I do this justice? Like,
yeah,
I don't want to be the person who writes the bad Delgado in, you know, story. Like, I don't want to get that wrong. Like, you know, it's, you know, you want to keep it pure almost, because it's so good as what it is.
It's a shame that you can't be here to enjoy the chaos and destruction with me.
So Delgado's master, as we've discussed, is really like cool and suave. But I really loved that in the novel, Terrence Dicks sort of showed us a little peek behind the curtain about like what happens when like the camera cuts, so to speak.
Rex blurted out his bad news.
Only one Auton has returned, without the Doctor. He was rescued by UNIT. The other Auton was destroyed.
A pity, said the Master lightly. But we have many more. Rex looked at him in amazement.
You're not angry?
Because the Doctor has escaped? Of course not. He's an interesting adversary. All it means is that the game can be prolonged a little.
But you still wish to destroy him.
The Master sighed regretfully. I'm afraid it will be necessary in the end. The more he struggles to postpone his death, the greater will be the final satisfaction. The Master passed over a pile of papers. Here are the final arrangements for the tour. They are to be made operational at once. See to it, please. Rex took the papers and left the office. As soon as he was gone, the Master's face twisted with rage. He slammed his fist onto the desk, cracking the heavy mahogany top. To preserve his enormous vanity, he was forced to pretend that his attempts to kill the Doctor were merely an amusing game, which he could end when he pleased. But each successive defeat was a cause of bitter anger. He began to plan the Doctor's destruction once more. This time, Doctor, he muttered savagely, this time you shall not escape me. I shall deal with you myself.
Final thought on why this Master is, you know, held in such high regard. It's changed now, but for the longest time, like Hartnell, I feel like this was the first Master in terms of maybe chronology. So,
yep,
which now is totally out of the, like, not at all anymore. But for a long time, it was like, yeah, this is the pure Master. The Master, his first regeneration, I guess we assumed like Hartnell because they're the first ones we see on screen. So you have nothing to assume came before.
Yeah, of course. And of course, there's the argument to be made for Hartnell these days, what with the Timeless Child and, of course, the Morbius Doctors and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Which, that's a different podcast. I'm not making that podcast.
Yeah. So that's not the point here, but I do think that added to the mystique of Delgado. He's the OG, like, first regen.
Yeah, which is interesting because this actually brings me on to a point that I wanted to talk about. In this story, when our gossipy bitch Time Lord comes down, he says to the third Doctor, the Master is on Earth. And the Doctor goes, him?
Knows who he is.
He knows who he is instantly. So that immediately is a hook. And it's not addressed later in the story.
Terrence changes this in the novel.
Does he?
The novel says that the Time Lord says in an inaudible Gallifreyan a word.
Right.
And the Doctor knows who that is. And then they say, I believe he calls himself the Master these days.
Oh, that's interesting. I like that because Terrence Dix was very, very fond of that. Like he was very much behind the idea of the Doctor like that business card, which was like a string of like numerals and Greek letters and stuff.
But be careful. The Master has learnt a great deal since you last met him.
So the Doctor knows who the Master is, and that's not... He strings out a little bit during that story about what that means. But again, it's one of those things that this is the start of a thread that we've been pulling at for over 50 years now. Is like, who is the Master to the Doctor? And it's never... I don't think it's ever going to be... I don't think it ever should be answered.
Yeah, I think it might be from the novels. But there's definitely like different names for them that they went by first. So the Doctor is Theta Sigma. And,
yes, Theta
and
Sigma.
the Master is... the pronunciation's probably going to be...
I believe it's Koshai or Koshai.
Probably.
That is something we're going to get into in this podcast. Like, this is the first episode. With Doctor Who, like, chronology is complicated, but it is nowhere near as bad as the Master. And the Master has so many conflicting things because basically, when it gets down to it, or at least for a very long time, the Master wasn't as important as the Doctor. It wasn't as important to nail down exactly what the Master was. So there are so many conflicting ideas. Even when we're doing this show that is only looking at things that have been officially licensed by the BBC, still wildly differing, especially in the wild days of the 90s. So these days, if you write for Doctor Who in some form for something, there is an office these days, I'm pretty sure the office is in Wolf Studios in Cardiff, but it used to be in the BBC, that would have dozens of people, and you would send them your Doctor Who idea, and they would check it with the showrunners and make sure that it fits into the universe and make sure that you're not trying to do anything that they're going to do next year, that sort of thing. In the 90s, that was one person in the BBC licensing department in a small office who handled dozens of properties. And so that is why you get really, like, I love the audios because they feel like the TV show. If you don't, like, the thing about the 1990s novels, like the Past Doctor Adventures and like the Virgin New Adventures and things like that, they're so bleak and grim. Like there is a companion that gets, like, there is a classic series companion who gets sexually assaulted and murdered.
Oh dear.
Yeah, this is not Doctor Who.
No.
That's not what Doctor Who's meant to be.
But the person in the licensing office was like, oh, sure.
Yeah, sure,
I don't
whatever.
have time to check this.
Basically.
I knock off in 10.
So that is why there is so much weird stuff about the Master. So yeah, that we will get into that because Koshai is one of those characters that may or may not be the Master, like where it fits. And I suppose a lot of it is just down to you.
Yeah. I think, so Terrence, I think definitely with the whole, and then the Time Lord spoke in Gallifreyan.
Yep.
I said a name. Definitely helps that sort of scenario of how does presumably the Doctor and the Master specifically have met.
See, that's how you make the show mysterious. That's how you add mystery to it. Not, I repeat, not by just putting question marks on everything. John Nathan Turner.
So I guess theoretically, Delgado is actually, back when there were regeneration limits, the second to last regeneration.
Well, It's
If
a
the
complicated.
show's chronology is to be believed, Beavers/Pratt comes next, which is like the end of the cycle.
Yeah, so
We have no reason to believe there's anyone in between them.
well, there's a throwaway line, and I can't remember which book it's in. We'll get to it. We'll find it. Where the Doctor says that the Master uses regenerations flippantly to get out of, like, it's his way of getting out of situations. He would regenerate to then be someone else, so he could just walk away free.
Yep.
Yeah. And so he would burn through his lives.
Back when that mattered.
Back when that mattered. Back when back in the day when they said that you had 13 lives and that was it. Also, like, it's funny, like, coming from this point of view, we don't realize that at the time they had no real. They used different terminology back then.
Yep.
Like, if you watch the Five Doctors, the Fifth Doctor is not called the Fifth Doctor; he's called the Fourth Regeneration.
Which
Like, it makes sense. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so the Master is a lot harder to pin down because obviously the Master goes off and the Master has their own life outside the Doctor, and a lot of it is really terrible.
Yeah.
You're sniggering because it does make it sound like it's more of a relationship than it is.
I've got a life outside of you, Doctor. The Doctor's like, stop coming here then. You're coming to me.
Oh, Doctor, why are you so obsessed with me?
But yeah.
You've come here to kill me, of course.
But not without considerable regret.
How very comforting.
What do you think we learn specifically about the Master that's important in this episode?
The Master is a Time Lord. Mm-hmm. He is a renegade. He has left Gallifrey. Mm-hmm. And as far as we know at this point, as far as we know for sure, they're the only two that are really on the radar, like the Doctor and the Master.
Yeah.
We know that the Doctor and the Master known each other before. We know that he's a talented hypnotist. We know that he's ruthless and will kill anyone that gets in his way.
He has the unique weapon, the tissue
the
compression.
tissue compression eliminator, which is a great title, even though it doesn't eliminate, it creates tissue compression. It compresses tissue. Tissue compression eliminate. They just like saying TCE, which has gone through many redesigns.
Yeah.
I love the first design. It is beautiful. It is very smooth, sort of cigar shape.
Yeah, he can really just swagger into a room with it.
You can't see it under his fingers, but there are actually like two silver, like bow, like
Yeah.
things for his fingers to sit in.
Goodbye, Doctor.
You were quite right.
Wait, don't shoot!
Doctor, you do disappoint me.
You mentioned in the book, which is published 4 years after, that the bomb that goes off, he sends a bomb to the Doctor. That's a Sontaran bomb in
Yes.
the book. Of course, the Sontarans didn't show up for another 3 years in the show.
Yeah, so in retrospect, he changes it to
he
be, I
changed
think.
it, which I think is one of those wonderful little changes that works brilliantly.
Yeah, because you can do that now. It's rather than just being a bomb, you give it a name. And it also implies, I think, feeding into this whole thing of the Master's clearly been talking to the Nestine consciousness.
Yeah.
He's also clearly been somewhere around Sontarans and nicked their stuff.
Yes.
Because I think there's more than one Sontaran grenade mentioned in the thing.
There are so many different grenades and bombs. He's got a real bag of tricks in
Yeah.
this story. Like, what was the total body count we had?
Okay, so the total body count by the end of Terror in the Autons is 49. He doesn't quite get to 50.
Doesn't quite get to 50, and that has so he's killed people via daffodil, via chair, via doll, via auto. Well, I suppose, did you count the auto?
He hypnotizes.
He hypnotizes Farrell to basically suicide by soldier.
Yep.
That's another thing. This episode starts a trend of people wearing masks that look like the Master, which you have to assume that because he spent this whole time in this rubber factory, that he's had all those masks made in the rubber factory, in this plastics factory. It's an amazing story.
Something I love about this story as well is that in any episode where the Doctor's TARDIS is left unattended, someone's kidnapped that TARDIS. Unit have shipped it back to HQ. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if the Doctor shows up somewhere with hostiles, but this time they specifically know that his TARDIS is that horse box in that circus, and Unit don't put a perimeter around it. They don't bring it back to HQ.
No, they
Like,
only
the
care
Doctor
about the
even-
Doctor's TARDIS.
Yeah, the Doctor even goes inside the Master's TARDIS. We don't get to see inside it in this episode.
I think it's interesting to note as well that the Master, he can't. So the Doctor has stolen the dematerialization circuit. The Master can't leave Earth, but he can still transport his TARDIS because his TARDIS does
Yes.
pop up again this season. Strictly speaking, actually, now I'm thinking I'm going into expanded universe stuff again because I think it is mentioned in one of the books, like the Eighth Doctor, that his TARDIS is actually the altar in the Demons.
Ah,
So the
okay.
chameleon circuit still works, unless what he did was drove the horse box in. I mean, because it looked like it had a wheel. Like, yeah, how is he transporting this?
Again, more of the mystery. I also love that he's decided to stay in the UK.
Well, that's an interesting point, isn't it? Because I think in the next story in this series, The Mind of Evil does involve
Of
the Chinese
course.
government quite a lot.
Sure.
I'm gonna be. It's interesting because this is the first real episode of this podcast, and I'm going to keep mentioning other Master stories that tangentially meet because I feel like maybe you'll enjoy it and go, oh, I want to hear more about that one. In the Doctor Who Unbound Sympathy for the Devil, which the whole point of that story is that when the second Doctor regenerated, he didn't make it to Earth in time. And so he lands in the 1990s, and all the things that happened to UNIT happened without him there. In that story, it's revealed that during the events of basically the Mind of Evil, the Master is kidnapped by the Chinese government and held captive and made to create weapons for them.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I actually just thinking them while you were talking. I think we actually did get to 50 deaths
Did we?
because I don't know if I counted the museum guard at the start.
Yeah, it just gets clobbered. Yeah.
But yeah,
Oh wow, you're right. It's 50 deaths.
so 50.
50 deaths. We're gonna add that to the spreadsheet. I'm probably gonna have to make this spreadsheet at least visible to public.
Hey, you! What is it you're doing? Stop!
We're not the sort of podcast that goes around rating stories because they're all great and we learn something new about the Master each time. And for what is ostensibly like now here we are over 50 years later and we're fairly confident that it's not the first Master, it's not the first time the Doctor met the Master, it's not the first time the Master worked with the Autons, or any of that. It is, but for us it's the first time we ever met the Master.
Yeah.
All it does is make you want more.
Yes,
you want to see more because
absolutely.
there's so many unanswered questions. I think the thing about Doctor Who is you go into Doctor Who knowing that you're not going to get the answers to questions because the whole point of Doctor Who is that the Doctor is an unanswered question.
You're going to learn as much as the companions ever learn.
Exactly. Whereas the Master, there is always the chance that you will learn something more, something new that you didn't know about before. And yeah, as a perfect start, it is a great place to start.
It is. And yeah, you see this and you can't wait to see him back on the screen again. And the best part, I guess, we're going to skip the rest of Delgado and we're going to go do a different Master next time. But they try to, this theme of disguises continues with him.
I love a
And
disguise.
So you're never quite sure if it's going to be him again, or they try to hide the fact vaguely that it's him who's going to show up.
Yeah.
So the other night, my husband and I, we were watching Frontier in Space, and I knew that Delgado was going to show up.
Yeah.
But Callum didn't realize. And then a door opens and the representative comes through and he was like, oh, God damn it. Because he just missed the fact that it was going to be. And he was like, of course it's him.
We're gonna have to keep a running gag of the nom de plumes as
Yes.
well. So in this story, it was Colonel Masters. I mean, it's a simple entry. It's a
Yeah.
first entry.
It's setting, I think, because remembering the show is for kids, it's setting an easy benchmark of he'll disguise himself, but we're going to start off literally with Master in the name just to get you going on that.
Yeah.
And then later on we'll start to make it more of a puzzle.
Well, yeah, and I mean it's long before even the the sort of Mission Impossible staple of like wearing rubber masks and
Masks,
tearing
yeah.
them off, but he's wearing them all the time. And what I love about this story is that he makes a rubber mask of himself and makes someone else wear it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really great.
Like in the short amount of time that he is in the bus, he manages to put Farrell in his clothes and put a rubber mask on him
Yep.
and hypnotize him. He really
He's
is
efficient.
masterful.
Yes.
You will obey me, Farrell. I am your master.
The master must be obeyed.
So, what's the name of the podcast?
Please attend carefully.
Yes. So I think we should test if you were attending carefully, Ciarán.
Oh, this is an amazing segment and I'm not prepared for it.
Although I think we might have touched on some of these things in our discussion. So I think
Okay.
some are hard and some are more difficult.
Is this going to be a running thing? Because I love it.
It can be.
Yes.
So the master refers to Luigi Rossini by his real name. What is it?
Lou Russell.
Yes. When talking to the Time Lord, the Doctor calls the master 3 things. What are they?
Oh, unimaginative, plodding,
No, that's the same thing. An unimaginative plodder.
right? Devious.
Nope.
No idea.
A jackanape
A jackanapes.
and a renegade.
A renegade. Whoa, yeah. I mean, that's a word that pops up a lot.
That jackanapes, all he ever does is cause trouble. I refuse to be worried by a renegade like the master. He's an unimaginative plodder.
All right, next one. How many people does the master hypnotize this episode? Who are they?
Oh, come on. All right. Rex Farrell. He attempts to hypnotize Rex Farrell's father, but he fails.
Attempt to, yes.
Does he hypnotize the Ulsterman, the North Irish guy? No. The one who's killed by the chair.
No.
No. He hypnotizes Joe.
Mm-hmm.
So it's 3 so far.
No, you've got 2 right so far.
I've got 2.
Oh, sorry. He does attempt to hypnotize the
Yeah.
father. Yeah. So there's 2 more.
2 more. Okay. Does he hypnotize Mike Yates?
Nope.
No, he just shows him a fake card and he's just wearing a rubber mask. That's right. Well done, Mike Yates. Why are you in this organization? We didn't even touch on the fact that it's Joe's first story.
Oh,
and
yeah. This isn't a podcast about...
no, but although it's worth noting that Joe has a lot of history with the Master.
I think we'll dedefinitely come back to Joe's
Yeah.
relationship with the master.
Okay. The guy with the glasses, the scientist at the beginning.
Yeah,
who,
the
yep,
radio tower. Phillips is his name.
Phillips. Yep, there you go. And Lou Russell.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay,
That's
there
all
we
4. Well, also, I will point out, I didn't put it on here. We don't know if the strong man is hypnotized or not.
No.
It's never confirmed, so I didn't put him on.
No, it's interesting, really, because it's the same actor who was in Tomb of the Cybermen as the strong man in that, who became cyber converted, and I recall him not really having many lines in that either.
Very well, Phillips. You know what you have to do.
Yes, master.
All right, next question. What does the master think is the most frightening thing about death?
Oh, it is most frightening when it is invisible.
When it strikes invisibly, yes. Which I think is a really great character thing. As we said about him burning regenerations.
Yeah.
The thing that scares him the most is not having control over when he dies.
Well, yeah, that is an interesting point about the Master in and of itself, isn't it? He needs to have control.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm loving this round. Keep it coming. Keep it
Right.
coming.
How many disguises / aliases does the master have in this episode, and what are they? There's a bonus point. Now, he had a 3rd disguise in the book, and I'm going to give you a clue if you can guess it. It's in the final act, and it's how he gets from the coach to the radio tower without units spotting him.
Okay, right. So first things first. He is in his suit as Colonel Masters.
Yep.
He is the telephone repairman.
Yes.
Does he at one point wear the dandy suit of the Autons?
That is the book only
Okay.
disguise of how he gets from...
Yeah.
That he doesn't just run across a field to the radio tower.
No, he dresses like one of the Autons.
Yes. And they don't find him amongst the crowd. So that's all 3.
Oh, it's all good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who are you?
Telephone engineer, sir. Just finishing.
Got your pass?
Now, final question. How do the Doctor and the Master defeat the Nestine consciousness?
How do they defeat that? We were talking at the time, I think.
I think you could get it, though. How do they defeat them?
They reverse the polarity.
They sure do.
Oh,
It's a dual reversing of the polarity.
yeah. So I have to say a little thing about reversing the polarity. So apparently, with season 7, with Liz Shaw, a lot of what they were saying was actual correct technobabble. And the scientists loved it. But someone at the BBC said, no, you've got to stop doing this. You've got to make it sound technobabbly without it actually being anything real, because then the people don't feel as bad for not knowing. And that is where reverse the polarity of the neutron flow comes from, which neutrons have no polarity. They do not flow.
But well done. I think you got every single one. I'm going to have to make it harder.
And now he's stuck here on Earth.
Yes, I'm afraid so.
Think he'll turn up again, Doctor?
Bound to.
You don't seem very worried about it.
I'm not. As a matter of fact, Joe, I'm rather looking forward to it.
That's all for this week's episode of Please Attend Carefully. Thank you so much for listening. We hope that with each new episode you come to understand, appreciate, and maybe even obey the Master. Don't forget to follow or subscribe to be updated on new episodes. Amber, how can listeners get in contact with us?
Well, they can send us an email at pleaseattendcarefully@gmail.com. Send us an ask on Tumblr at pleaseattendcarefully. Or you can follow us on Instagram at pleaseattendcarefully.
Yep. Don't forget you can also go to pzinner.com.au/shows/attend for exclusive content not available in the main feed. I've been Ciarán.
And I've been Amber. We leave you with a clue for the next week's episode.
We hope you'll be tuning in. After all, it can't hurt you to listen, can it?